Today, I'm going to share with you my top tips for photographing dancing photos at a wedding. If you want to capture those epic moments on the dance floor and create stunning images, then keep watching. Now, before we dive into the techniques that I use, let's quickly talk about the gear that you'll need. First, you'll need a camera with manual mode capabilities, either a DSLR or mirrorless camera. Next, make sure you have a wide angle lens, somewhere around 24 to 35 millimeters is good. And finally, an external flash unit with the ability to rotate the head is important to have. Okay, let's move on to camera settings. I recommend using manual mode so you can control exactly what your settings are. You can start by setting your ISO to either between around 800 to 1600. These settings will maintain a good balance of letting in the light while reducing the amount of noise in the image. Next, set the aperture to either 2.8, f2.8 or higher. Setting your aperture to f2.8, it will look nice in the images because it will help isolate your subject and blur out the background, so it will lessen the distractions in the image. Finally, you can adjust your shutter speed to around 1/60th of a second to 1/160th of a second. The lower the shutter speed, the more ambient light will enter your frame and it will lighten up your photos. There are so many ways to capture dancing photos, but I'm going to highlight two of my favorite ways that I use at every wedding. So for slow dancing, like couple dancing, I prefer to shoot with a wider aperture, like between f2.8 to f4, and I bounce my flash off a ceiling or a wall. By bouncing the flash, the lighting will have a softer appearance on the people. And by using a wider aperture, you will isolate your subject in the frame. Now let's talk about when the dancing gets a little more intense and when the level of light goes down in the room. Once there's more movement and less light, it can be more difficult to focus on your subject. When the dancing or the movement gets a little bit crazier, I switch my flash so that I'm shooting with direct flash. So I turn my flash around and instead of bouncing it off the ceiling, I'll point it directly at the people that I'm photographing. Using direct flash can be a powerful tool to use for dancing photos. It helps freeze the motion and it adds a pop of light to your images. The direct flash will light up the people in the center of your images, and then the light will fall off quickly, so anything behind those people won't be lit as much, and then they will kind of disappear into the background. Now here's an example showing dancing lit with direct flash versus bounce flash. So you can see the difference here. Now here's another example of showing dancing lit with direct flash versus no flash. You can see that there's a big difference in the images here, and the dancing lit with flash is obviously a better image. So the moral of the story is, if you are photographing people dancing in a dark room, you really do need to use flash. So how do I get those direct flash dancing photos? Well, when the dance floor opens up, I make sure to have my widest lens on my camera body, which is my 24 to 70 f2.8 lens. This lens is so versatile and it works great for dance photos. I set the lens to 24 millimeters because using the wide lens allows you to get right in on the dance floor and into the action. Shooting like this really does make you part of the party. And sometimes when you're right in the middle of the dance floor, it helps to do a few dance moves just to blend in. Once I'm in the middle of the dance floor, I will take my flash and I'll point it at the people in front of me dancing. I'll get right in on the action. I'll hold my camera up over my head, point it slightly down at the people, and then I'll start shooting. So my camera settings when I'm shooting like this, I set my lens to 24 millimeters, so the widest setting on that lens. My aperture will be at f8, which is a higher aperture, but I like that aperture because it provides a greater depth of field and it ensures that more of the people will be in focus. I usually set my shutter speed to about 1/100 of a second, and my ISO, depending on the amount of light in the room, could be anywhere between 800 to 1600. Having a higher ISO will allow some of the background light to enter into the image. Another trick that is really important in a lot of these situations is to manually set your focus. So I will switch my lens to manual focus and I will preset the focus to about 2 meters. If I'm close up to the people that I'm shooting, I find that this camera setting works well the people will be in focus and well lit, which is important. This type of shooting works really well on packed dance floors, and it's especially helpful at Jewish weddings when they're dancing the hora. The hora dance can get just like so crazy. I love hora dances, but they're tricky to shoot, and if you use this type of technique, you'll end up with better focused images and more consistently lit images than if you shoot at, say, like f8, bouncing your flash. Another tip is that when I'm on the dance floor, I try to get a variety of types of images. So for example, if the bride and groom are dancing in a circle, I'll take pictures of the bride and groom. But then I also don't want to forget the people behind me who are watching the bride and groom, because they probably have some great expressions. So once I get photos of the bride and groom, I'll spin around and take photos of the crowd. Those type of candid photos really help bring your images to life and show the energy of the party. So there you have it. Those are my top tips for shooting dancing photos. Remember to choose your gear carefully, adjust your camera settings, and you can use direct flash when needed. You can experiment with those angles and the composition and capture those candid moments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos like this. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Until next time, and happy shooting.